There we go. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Dr. Tara Tuesdays. I am so excited to join you. I apologize. We had a few technical difficulties, and so I'm going to give the live a few minutes just to allow people to get on and sign on with me. If you are new to the Dr. Tara community, I want to welcome you to Dr. Tara Tuesdays. Please feel free, if you are new, to leave your email address in the comments. We would love to stay connected with you and invite you to all of our events and happenings, and just keep you abreast on topics that we try to talk about and discuss in a safe, supportive, and always from a healing perspective. Tonight's conversation is so important to me because we are going to be talking about, this continues our conversation with Black parents around identifying ways to support the needs of our children. And so understanding that and understanding how to best do that and figuring out ways that we can support their emotional health and their emotional wellness. And so last week we talked about supporting Black boys, why Black boys need therapy. And it was a very, very enriching conversation. I appreciate the comments and the feedback and the interaction that we have. And tonight we're going to be talking about why Black girls need therapy. Hey, if you're just tuning in, please feel free to give me a wave or a hello. We're going to be talking about why Black girls need therapy and why this is such an important topic for us to talk about and address. And so when we're thinking about this, one of the things that always comes to mind when I'm working with Black women, Black girls, is just some of the programming that people often talk about, how we are really programmed as children to believe certain ideals and have these images given or images of representation shown to us and what that does. And so when we're looking at this from a childhood perspective, again, under the context of continuing this conversation for Black parents and why Black girls need therapy, looking at the context of programming. And so one of the things that we often see that is both well documented in research and also well documented just in stories is this idea that Black girls in particular, specifically, are programmed to live in a society or in a mindset of what I equate to fear, right? Because it's always or oftentimes associated with lack or a shortage. And so, think about, and if any of you are Black women, again, I want to hear your comments. So please let me know you're here. But you hear phrases almost from childhood of there not being enough, right? Not enough what? Not enough partners, not enough suitable positions, not enough something, or you are the only one, or you are the first one. And so one of the things that it teaches our girls from a very early age is this notion of competition. And so I'm not seeing other Black women as my equal, I'm seeing them as competitors. And one of the things that it does is take away from a sense of community, it takes away a sense of building, but then it also takes away a sense of vulnerability, because if I see you as a competitor, I'm not really seeing you as a person where I can receive help or where I can receive guidance from. I'm seeing you in a field. I remember reading an article, and they were talking to a woman who was the first Black something. We can fill in the blank with so many answers. And she said it really created an opportunity to pit her against other people who were also in that space, but she was conditioned to believe that she could be the only one. And so when we see those things, one of the things that we want to understand is how that creates a sense of competition, how that creates a sense of competitiveness, and more importantly, how that creates a sense of isolation. And so when we see that, one of the things that also happens to a lot of Black girls, and if you've experienced this as a Black woman, if your daughter is experiencing this, please let me know in the comments. I want to bring those comments up. But one of the things that we also see too is that when I'm working in silos, or when I'm working thinking that there's this shortage or there's this lack or there is not enough of something, then that isolates me, or that creates a sense of representation that is not there, right? I become the representative for my group. I become the spokesperson for my group. And more importantly, I'm expected to exhaust myself while accepting almost mediocrity from others without any resources, right? And it creates this superwoman syndrome that often starts for so many Black women in childhood, right? I've learned how to take care of this person. I've learned how to take care of someone else. I've learned how to do something else. And so when we're talking about that, one of the things that we see is that it develops or it creates this working twice as hard mentality and the glorification of perfection. And how often for so many Black women, and I'll go Black women and then go back to Black girls, for so many women, this idea that I have to be perfect, this idea that I can't make mistakes really has been a lifelong belief. And the notion that if I do make a mistake, I am beating myself up. I have let down so many people, and just the weight that comes with that notion of perfection, that notion that I cannot be a child, that notion that I cannot, ask for help. I have to figure everything out on my own, all the while making sure that I am there for other people. And when we start to break this down, one of the things that also happens too is when I have to be perfect, I'm not allowing myself to experience the full range of human emotions. So one of the things that we talked about last week, if you were on, and just to fill those of you in who weren't here, but one of the things that we talked about last week was understanding how these 6 universal emotions that we all have, regardless of race, gender, socioeconomic status, everything, how these 6 universal emotions play into our ability to express ourselves, our ability to express and acknowledge what we need, and also our ability to live these authentic lives. And so when we understand these 6 universal emotions, and as always, I'll put them in the comments, they are joy, anger, fear, sadness, shame, and curiosity. One of the things that we have to ask ourselves is, which emotions are Black girls allowed to experience, right? Which emotions are expected of us? Which emotions are expected of our daughters? And which emotions, from a cultural standpoint, from a societal standpoint, from an educational standpoint, are the ones that are kind of denied to us? And when you see these emotions, and again, please feel free to let me know in the comments, and thank you, Zach, for the lovely compliment. But when we see these emotions, joy, anger, fear, sadness, shame, and curiosity, one of the things that happens is that a lot of these emotions are not permitted, in a sense. So when we look at curiosity, looking at Black girls exploring, one of the things that has often been heavily documented in this work, and just researching Black women, researching emotions, researching their being, is this idea of sexually objectified at very early ages, right? So we're more likely, so my curiosity is seen as negative, and not even in a sexual way, but how that is often grouped or tied together. When we look at, anger, we have the notion of the angry Black woman. And again, that begins for so many Black girls in childhood. When I'm looking at, and I'm going to go from an equity standpoint, but when I'm looking at issues that we often see related to equity in Black girls, the disparities that we see related to discipline, and how that narrative of, okay, well, she's just so angry, literally begins, we can trace that back to childhood. And so there's certain emotions, I'm thinking of anger, that's given to Black women, that's given to Black girls. And when I am angry, I'm not allowed to express it fully, because when I express it, it comes at a cost. It comes at a higher level or a more intense discipline. And so one of the things that we see that happens very early and very often among our Black girls is that I learned very early on which emotions I can share and which emotions I have to keep inside, which emotions someone can be with me on, and which emotions I'm not allowed to express, and I have to figure them out on my own. One of the things that we also see too is with this notion of I have to be perfect, how that also disallows me to experience several other emotions, how it doesn't allow me to say that I'm scared, how it doesn't allow me to say that I'm sad, how it doesn't allow me to say that, again, that I'm curious, that I want to seek this out, because of all this interconnection or all this responsibility that Black women have learned to take on almost in the form of martyrdom very early on in our experiences. So many of our conversations with Black women, or so many of my conversations with Black women, again, are around issues that I'm carrying from my childhood. And so the talk that we're having tonight, and again, please feel free to join me in the comments about how this has manifested in your life, really starts from, I wasn't allowed to be this. You know, so many women talk about, I wasn't allowed to experience childhood fully. I wasn't allowed to be a child because I felt this responsibility, or I felt this pressure, or I felt compelled to act or behave a certain way. And so when we see this, one of the things that happens is that I become my own antagonist, right? I begin to antagonize myself because I'm creating this, I feel like I'm responsible for creating this space where everyone else feels safe, even if it is at my own expense. I have to make everyone else feel safe. I have to make sure everyone else feels secure, even if it means that I'm putting or pushing my issues to the back or to the back burner. And so one of the things that often happens, especially with Black girls, is that we have to grow up very quickly, right? Because I have to take care of everyone else. And if you've experienced that, please let me know. I want to bring you all into this conversation. And understanding with that, when I'm growing up quickly from a emotional standpoint, one of the things that's not happening for me is I'm not bringing my authentic self into whatever situation I'm in. I'm bringing parts of me, I'm bringing in what I perceive people want to see. And so it creates this sense of people pleasing, or it creates this sense of being able to, wanting to cater to others, again, learning that I have to put my needs on the back burner. And so one of the things that we want to say is, how do we work to create the space, or how do we work to create a safe space where Black women or Black girls really can learn to get their needs met? And so when we see that, one of the things that we talk about when we're advocating for the emotional wellness or the emotional health of Black girls means that I want to create a space where I can be less than perfect. I want to create a space where I am seen for being myself, where I'm seen, or where I'm allowed and I'm giving myself permission to make mistakes. And the beauty of that. So one of the needs that all children have, and again, this is regardless of gender, one of the needs that all children have is the need for autonomy and the need to fail. And one of the things that we often see is that, again, when I feel the pressure to be perfect, failure comes at a huge expense, one, to myself, and then two, how I'm perceiving it to be or received by childhood. And so when we see that, I'm not allowing myself to be perfect. And Shamika, thank you for tuning in. Yes, my childhood included taking care of my siblings and cousins. An unspoken rule was that anger was to be felt, not shown. And so thank you for that, because I think that that's such a true statement, and that adds to just what we're saying. And so I can be angry, but I can't show it. I can't question certain things. I just have to take it. And so it teaches a level of compliance that I may not agree with. I may want to advocate for myself. I may want to assert myself. And a lot of times when it comes out, if I'm told, or if I'm expected to feel anger but not express it, one of the things that it creates is this repression. I'm just kind of pushing it down and pushing it down and pushing it down. And so when it comes out, oftentimes it comes out explosive, in an explosive way, either towards myself, internalized, or it comes out externally towards someone else, because I haven't been able to let it come out just in little bits, right? I'm not able to be irritated. My anger has to be expressed as full-blown rage, or I'm going to keep it tighten up, because I want to make sure that everyone else is okay. And so understanding that when we talk about creating these safe spaces, emotional wellness, therapy, or giving the opportunity for therapy, one of the things that I'm talking about is I'm creating a safe space for me to be less than perfect. And the permission that comes with that, for me to mess up, for me to fail, and to learn that part of my healing or part of my work is creating the safest places for me to fail. And then I want to go back to Shamika's point, and I'm going to put it back on here, because then it also provides, when I'm talking about my own emotional wellness, it also provides me a space to be both angry and then also happy. So when I feel pressure, and I'm just going to speak from a global perspective, when I feel pressure to take care of everyone else, when I feel pressure to carry the burdens of everyone else, or to kind of shapeshift myself into roles that accommodate other people, one of the things that also happens is that my happiness or my joy, one of those 6 universal emotions, also becomes an emotion that I have to justify, right? So meaning that I can experience joy, but I can't be too happy. And I don't know if anybody has ever experienced that, but I'll speak from my own personal experience. I can experience it, but I don't want to be too happy because, again, thinking about that, that programming of lack, right? There's not enough. I don't want to be the only one. I don't want to be the first. Or if I'm happy, then someone else can't be happy. Literally those small things that we don't even think about, but that become a part of our psyche or become part of our unconscious beliefs. So I'm kind of channeling or kind of filtering my happiness, or capping, I will say that's a better term, capping my happiness at a place where if I'm happy, I'm not too happy, or if I'm happy, I'm cautiously happy, right? So I'm happy with the notion that, one, this isn't going to last, or I'm happy with the notion that, okay, what else can go wrong, or when is the other shoe going to fall? And again, if you've experienced this, please feel free to give me a thumbs up or let me know in the comments. And so when I'm talking about giving space or creating platforms for our daughters, for Black girls, giving them the space to be both angry and happy, meaning that I can be as angry as I want to be, and I can be as unapologetic about that. And on the flip side, I can be as happy and joyful as I want to be without having to justify it. One of the things that's often taught to us in childhood, and this goes across both genders, but one of the things that's often taught to us in childhood is that our joy has to be justified. And one of the things that one of the greatest gifts that we can do, and Shamia, yes, you said we do it unconsciously, the notion of what we're telling ourselves to. But one of the greatest things that we can do is give ourselves permission to be happy, to feel gratitude, to feel appreciation. And how do we start to do this with our girls? Well, I can start to do this by doing that self-love. So when we talk about, again, with this equity work or representation, giving myself permission to see myself in a way that I may not be portrayed. And so that means that I may have to counter how I'm viewed in media, or how I'm viewed in music, or how I'm viewed in literature, consciously challenging that notion and finding representation that looks like me, that shows me feeling and experiencing joy fully. And then when I think about the third part, or the third takeaway from tonight's session, is when we talk about creating emotionally safe spaces through therapy or however we see fit, but creating that platform, it becomes the answer to having a need to ask for help and not have it all figured out. And I'm going to give my own thumbs up, but when we talk about, I don't have to have it all figured out, the weight that comes off of our shoulders when we allow ourselves to do that. And so, Shamika, I want to go to your question because I'll come back to this, but what does allowing them to be angry look like? Is it time to process or in behavior? And so my thought is that it's both, because so when I'm talking about, and I'll leave your question up, but allowing someone to be angry means that I'm allowing myself to be with you as you experience it. So the behavior piece, it really is dependent upon you. So I can tell my children, or I can tell someone, you can be angry and yet you can't kick a hole in the wall, right? You can't do that because that's damaging property. That's not respecting my space, but you can be angry, meaning that if you need to cry, you can cry. If you need to write, you can write. If you need to be by yourself, you can be by yourself. If you need to find someone other than me to talk to express yourself, you can do that. Because part of this work means I have to allow you the space and allow you the platform to find what your healing looks like. And to also know too, that you don't have to, not that you can't, you can if you want to, but that you don't have to stay there. And I want to tie this comment back to something that you said, or something that you wrote earlier, where you said, an unspoken rule was that anger was to be felt, but not shown. And so what I take from that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I take from that is that anger almost becomes an expected emotion for us to have, or for girls to have, right? Someone's messing with me, I have to do this, I have to do this. And it kind of becomes, and again, it feeds into later life, this angry Black woman syndrome, right? Anger is an emotion that's given to us. I expect you to be angry. And so for many people, not being angry is more uncomfortable or is more of a task to be learned than actually being angry. And I hope that makes sense. And if it doesn't, let me know. But what that means is, am I allowed to experience my anger with the notion or with the intention of releasing it? Not to just hold on to it, right? Not to, okay, vent to you, and just continue the storyline. But can I have a process for releasing? And so what does that releasing process look like? It looks like, one, just time and space. So thinking about, there's an exercise that we do, or that I do with groups, and it's called feeling versus need. And I recommend that as a parent, you can take this and do it with your child too. But imagine a time where you felt, and give them one of these 6 emotions. When you feel joy, when you feel anger, when you feel shame, when you feel sadness, right? This is the feeling. What is it that you need in this moment? Do you need space? Do you need to hear your favorite song? Do you need to look at a picture of a person that you love? Do you need to have a moment to yourself? Do you need to write? And working with your child or working with your daughter through this process so that they can then see. And then part of the process, actually, for us as parents, is the skill called being with, right? So our ability to be with our child or be with our children is, I can name this emotion for you. There's been so many times where we can feel emotions, or because we feel it in our bodies first, right, before we're aware of what it is. And so we feel it in our bodies, and we then understand, we may not even then understand what the emotion is. And so part of my work may be to say, Shamika, I see that you're upset. And that's it, right? I don't have to justify my reasoning why you may be upset. I can just give you the permission to be upset, right? Because part of this work, when we talk about why Black girls need therapy, is giving them permission to feel. I can give you that permission to feel whatever it is you're feeling without justification, without being defensive around it. And I'm not going to take it from you. So often, one of the things that we do, and I'll claim it. So now I won't make it a we, I'll make it an I statement. One of the things I may do is, what are you angry about? You don't have anything to be angry about. What are you sad about? What do you, and when we do that, we take away my emotional experience, right? I'm taking that away from you. And so we don't have to, and as parents, one of the things that we have to acknowledge too, as a part of our work, because parenting is hard. There's a meme going around that, I'm saying amen and hallelujah every time I see it. And it says, you all parent after you get off of work. Wow. And I felt that, I felt that in my soul. And so often as parents, when our children experience emotions that, one, we haven't fully learned to process, or two, that make us uncomfortable, we either try to do one of 3 things. I either try to distract, right? So you're angry, and so I want to make you not angry. So let's go get something to eat, or let's go do this, or let's go do that. That's distraction. Or I try to minimize, again, which is the example I just gave. So what are you angry about? You don't have a right to be angry. I'm minimizing your emotions. There's something else that you can, do, or busy yourself with something else. I'm minimizing your experience. Or I try to overpower. There's another meme that's going around that talks about the relationship with mothers and daughters that say, that relationship between mothers and daughters is intense. One day she's my homegirl, the next day, I'm almost squaring up. And so I've seen that reposted so many times on social media, which means that when she feels an emotion, that when she's angry and I'm angry, guess who gets to be angrier? Me, because I get to overpower that emotion. And so I think your question is so valid, and I appreciate it, because when we talk about what does allowing them to be angry look like, it means, one, the first step is I'm going to acknowledge and honor it without trying to minimize, distract, or overpower. And then the second is I'm going to allow you and I to process it. And I'm going to allow you to hold the space to be angry, to be happy, to be sad, or whatever that, to be scared. in a way that doesn't take away or make you feel bad for having this emotion. So many of us, and you can, again, I'll give myself a thumbs up too, but so many of us have been taught that certain emotions come with a side of guilt, right? So whether, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier, whether it's, I feel happy, but I'm waiting for the other shoe to fall off. I feel guilty about being happy. I feel angry at this person, but I shouldn't, right? So I feel guilty about that. So many of our emotions are taught to girls to come with a side of guilt. And so allowing the allowance of emotion means that I can give you this emotion, or I can give you the space to have this emotion without anything else. And I think that's one of the biggest gifts, because what that does, and then tying it into our third point, which is what I was talking about first, is it gives you the opportunity and the space to ask for help. And you don't have to have the pressure to have it all figured out, meaning that I cannot know. And what a joy and what a skill it is to be able to say, I don't know, but I'm willing to learn, or I'm willing to figure this out, or I'm willing to walk through this process. And so when I talk about why Black girls need therapy, again, the reason is because we want to teach them an abundance mindset. So many articles, and I want you all to think about what this does from an emotional standpoint. So many things we read is, again, not enough, right? There's not enough something. This is the only one. This is the first. We're talking about all of, the beauty queens, right? They are the first. They are the only. They are, and that's wonderful for them. But again, it creates this sense of competition. It also creates, for some, a sense of shortage or lack, or I'm the only one that can occupy this space. And so when we're talking about emotional wellness, and being that as people of color, we are a communal people, it allows me to connect with other people who are in this space, who are doing this work, right? That I can see as a collaborator versus a competitor, right? And so thanks to, yes, that abundance mindset, it takes away from this shortage or this lack mindset. And then also it allows me to see myself being represented in a way that's vulnerable and in a way that's fully human. I get to take off. So many of us talk about wearing the Superwoman cape. Well, when did you get it? Did you get it when you became an adult? No, I got it in childhood. I saw, so many of us talk about, well, I saw my mom do this. I saw my aunt do this. I saw my grandmother do this, So we've created these roles for ourselves, again, that we can literally trace back to childhood for so many women. Now, I'm not saying all, so don't generalize it, but for so many women, it traces back, or it goes back to childhood. And so seeing myself represented in a way that allows me to experience the fullness of me without having to be the savior for everyone else. And then not having to, getting rid of that twice as hard mentality, right? So feeling like I have to exhaust myself in the name of perfection, again, while accepting mediocrity from others, right? Or accepting less than from others, but I have to be the perfect one. And so allowing our girls to see themselves as human, and allowing our girls to see themselves as having a human experience, and being able to fully experience and fully talk about and express these 6 universal emotions. Because what it then does is that it takes away the need for creating this false sense of control. So I didn't get a chance to talk about that. So really quickly, as we get ready to wrap up, one of the things that it also does, when I'm allowing myself to be human, when I'm allowing myself to be imperfect, it takes away my sense that sometimes I have to control everything. So when I have to be perfect, it means that I have to be able to put everything in order. And I have to be able not only to control myself, but it also gives me the pressure to control the lives of others. And so it creates almost, and I don't know if anyone else has felt like this, where you have this state of mind where the entire world depends on you. And we see it reflected back in the media. When we look at elections, right? We talk about the power of the vote of the Black woman, like Black women got this person, Black women help, it literally creates, and it's reiterated and it's reinforced, where I am carrying this weight. And so again, being able to take off this control, and the need for control really creates anxiety, right? Because I have to control myself, and I have to know what you're going to do, and I have to know what you're going to do, and I have to make sure that this person is okay. And it allows me again to understand that I can be responsible for myself, and I can trust that this person has the resources that they need to be responsible for themselves. And so in understanding all of that, the gift that we give to our girls, to give it to them in childhood, so that it's a little bit easier to manage and to navigate as I'm going through adulthood, so that the stigma becomes a little bit less and less around taking care of ourselves. And one of the things that we also see too is that when we think about this martyrdom, this notion that self-care is taught at the point of exhaustion, right? So, you go to even a notion of therapy. You go to therapy when you meet this criteria, right? Not necessarily to think about, okay, well, I'm just trying to figure things out. I'm trying to figure my emotions out. Childhood is hard, especially growing up in this day and age where you have so much exposure before your brain is really ready to process. We'll do a session on technology and how it impacts the brain, but I have so much exposure to information that I'm not ready to process. My brain is not mature enough to process and handle. And so how do I learn to navigate that? How do I learn to navigate myself and find myself in this world in a way that allows me to create an identity that I like? And so for so many of our girls, they're in that identity versus identity, what we call identity diffusion stage, where I'm working to create my identity, but I'm working against the identity that has been shown back to me, right? How am I represented? How am I seeing myself reflected back in the world? And so when we think about creating emotional spaces and safe spaces for our girls, being able to see myself reflected back, or being able to see myself in a way that allows me to consciously and authentically choose an identity that I want to align myself with and move forward to, that includes having a space to be less than perfect. Even with the best of expectations, I'm not saying take the expectations away. I'm saying take the perfectionism away. I'm giving myself permission to be human, giving myself permission and giving myself a space to be angry, giving myself the space to be happy without cause or without justification. And lastly, giving myself the space to ask for help and not having to have it all figured out. And again, that creates that sense of collaboration. So we are at time. I hope that this has been helpful. I had so I feel really good about the Dr. Star Tuesday today, because I had some people trolling. So I feel like I've made it up a level of the social media echelon, but I appreciate your comments. I appreciate your feedback. We are going to take 2 breaks just because of the holidays. So next week, we're going to show a repeat. For those of us who've been impacted by grief and loss, next Tuesday, Christmas Eve, we're going to be replaying the grief and loss video. And then on New Year's Eve, we're going to be replaying authenticity. I know New Year's resolutions come out a lot this time of year. And so just creating New Year's resolutions that align with our authentic selves and our authentic spirit. As always, thank you all so much for tuning in. I love the Dr. Tara community, and I look forward to seeing you all in 2020. Have a safe and wonderful New Year and holiday season. And as always, let's heal together. Peace.